A bloodbath has begun between the Kadyrovites and the Russian army. Akhmat is being destroyed in the media. Will there be a response, and what will it lead to? Web 2.0 is already on the way. Zelenskyy made a cryptic statement about strikes on Russian territory, saying that most operations are still ongoing. Gerasimov once again reported incredible victories, yet more captured settlements that exist only in the occupiers' wet dreams. Explosions in Pyatigorsk and drones are not to blame. What happened on Russian territory? Russia has officially confirmed the first death of a Russian student who went to fight against Ukraine under contract. Meanwhile, Russian aerial bombs and air defense systems continue to kill Russians, and mass riots are brewing in Russia itself. Good morning, this is today's news. My name is Eva Nikolashvili. Like and subscribe because we're starting right now. The Toad of Gadyukino in Russia. Russian officials have started to destroy the media image of Kadyrov's men. Pavel Gubarev, the first go-lighter of the occupation administration in Donetsk, who in his recent interview directly called Akhmat an Aladdin of fascists and called Putin an accidental man and a puppet, has once again come out with exposé information. For example, Gubarev stated that the Kadyrovites received a hefty reward for the occupation of Mariupol, although
Mariupol is a metallurgical city, so you can cut everything up for scrap, but you can't restore it. There's a huge amount of scrap metal there.
Which of course can be sold.
Worth about 20 billion. It needs to be cut up and sold, but the question is, who got the money?
It was given to Akhmat.
Yeah, but why? Well, for what purpose?
That's a good question, yeah. And
also, a Russian official talked about how Akhmat is siphoning off Kremlin money. According to him, Kadyrov's men have set up a system of fake injuries to get insurance payouts. I
write a lot about how they fake injuries in Akhmat and how they kill those who are inconvenient. Fake injuries. Friends have told me that in Akhmat there's a guy who has 60 injuries.
60 injuries?
Yes. Or there's that guy, what's his name, Aid, who has 14 injuries. You see? Well, obviously, maybe there are some real pairs, but 3? Okay. Each injury is worth 3 million, and that money just gets split between the bosses, the medics, and you. Boom, and you get 10 salaries or 5 salaries. You put it in your pocket. Nice, very nice.
Ukraine is preparing Web 2.0. That's the conclusion you can draw from Volodymyr Zelenskyy's statements. He spoke very mysteriously about the strikes on Russian territory. The president of Ukraine showcased long-range strikes on Russia over the past week, and he added that most of the operations are still ongoing. As for the already known hits, as a result of the attacks by the armed forces of Ukraine, there, a Ka-27 helicopter, a cargo ship with ammunition, a Pantsir S-1 anti-aircraft missile and gun system, a Tor anti-aircraft missile system, a Redut-2 U.S. communications complex, drones, and much more were damaged. Also, a B-200A amphibious aircraft was hit. There are only a few of these in existence. Earlier, SBS reported that the B-200 is a search and rescue aircraft which, in addition to its primary purpose, the occupiers used for maritime reconnaissance and rapid deployment of personnel to coastal areas. Once again, unprecedented successes for the Russian army. However, they exist only in Gerasimov's reports. The chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces once again reported on victories. For example, Gerasimov claimed that the Russian army had allegedly captured 85% of the city of Lyman in the Donetsk region. According to him, the 25th Army continues street fighting to liberate Krasny Lyman, a major administrative center and railway hub, attacking Ukrainian armed forces units on the territory of the Sviaty Hory National Park. Interestingly, on April 21st, Gerasimov stated that the occupiers had taken control of about 70% of the city's territory. A month before that, he reported the capture of half of Lyman. But once again, the words of the chief of the General Staff are nothing but a regular lie. According to the Deep State map, as of May 15th, the Ukrainian armed forces almost completely control Lyman. Only small gray zones are marked in its eastern part. According to the Institute for the Study of War, the Russian army approached the city from the east but did not enter it. Gerasimov also reported on the development of the offensive west of Kupiansk, generally in the direction of Shevchenkove, and the liberation of Borova. And once again, Gerasimov was betrayed by maps from open sources. According to them, all statements by the head of the Russian General Staff are far from reality. However, we had no doubt about that. Putin is being lied to by his own generals. They take advantage of the elderly and backward dictator's lack of internet skills and feed him false information about the situation at the front. So, Putin is convinced that the Russian army is advancing victoriously and that only a few months remain until the complete capture of Donbass. We will prove that this does not correspond to the real state of affairs at all.
Top-ranking Russian generals are misleading Putin.
I don't see anything unusual about this.
Despite the catastrophic situation at the front, the Ministry of Defense of the aggressor country reports to the Kremlin about supposed captures of more and more territories. Meanwhile, the Russian army is supposedly winning so actively that their rate of advance over the past 3 months has become the lowest since 2023. Since 2023, according to analysts, if the current trend continues, it will take Russia decades to fully occupy the Donbass.
They love to watch the black sky, that's clear, and they don't want to communicate with their leadership in any way. Shapuri only sells them war.
Nevertheless, Russian commanders convinced Putin that their troops could fully capture the Donbass by autumn, which apparently greatly encouraged the bunker dweller.
That's what they convinced him of. His own generals who claimed that supposedly the front was collapsing and that Ukraine would soon have nothing left. Soldiers to defend the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. That is precisely why negotiations are unrealistic at this point.
But this, first of all, puts an end to all the speculation, fantasies, and discussions about how peace has suddenly become closer, that there is some kind of secret agreement, that Xi Jinping and Trump, they'll agree on peace in Ukraine, that Putin and Trump will secretly come to an agreement about something. That's it. Green Asba.
But the Russian army is simply not capable of capturing Donbass by force, which means the Kremlin decided to acquire new territories without a fight at all.
President Zelenskyy must order the armed forces of Ukraine to cease fire and leave the territory of Donbass. Leave the territory.
Then supposedly, the bunker dweller is ready to sit down at the negotiating table and give the order to cease fire.
I think things are coming to an end, but still, this is a serious matter. We have never been closed off to negotiations. Never.
But all of this is just another Putin ploy, military analysts insist. After taking the well-fortified Ukrainian outposts in Donbass without a fight, Pinya will immediately give the order to prepare for a new offensive.
Putin hopes that if the operation to take control of Donbass is completed, he will then be able to expand his demands further, which in particular will include the territory of Kherson and Zaporizhia regions.
Let's be honest, even the bunker dweller himself, just a few minutes after talking about being ready to sit down at the negotiating table, he openly admits that he has no intention of talking, let alone ending the war.
The armed forces must focus their full attention on achieving the final and complete defeat of the enemy as a core part of the ongoing special military operation in order to ensure a successful outcome.
According to Western media citing sources, in the Kremlin, Putin's real goal is at least all of left bank Ukraine, as well as Kyiv and Odessa. However, the Russian generals just humor the bunker dweller, and while they nod along, in reality, they don't believe in such a scenario even hypothetically. The same goes for the Kremlin elites, who are actively trying to dissuade Putin from continuing the special military operation.
Maybe they themselves, the smartest and most cynical ones secretly, off camera, are snickering about all this. And the spirit of the late Chechetov is floating around there saying, "Fooled them like kittens." In reality, they themselves find it funny, but surely, except for the most thick-headed ones, they understand that this is nonsense, that it's pure fantasy. Nevertheless, they keep waving this piece of paper around.
But for the bunker dweller, it all goes in one ear and out the other. As they gossip in the Kremlin, Putin has once again become obsessed with the idea of taking Kyiv in 3 days. And the only thing that might convince him to drop this idea are Ukrainian drones destroying the remnants of his military-industrial complex and oil refineries. Is that giving them their due? The Ukrainian armed forces have excelled at this. Yes, so much so that with each passing day, it becomes harder for Russian generals to keep lying to the old man about victories at the front, amid the constant sound of air raid sirens in Moscow and burning oil ports deep in the rear.
There's action happening on Russian territory. On Saturday night, Ukrainian armed forces drones attacked the Stavropol region. After a series of drone strikes, the chemical plant Nevinomysky Azot is on fire there.
DK, it seems there was an explosion. It didn't work at all, not a single shot was fired.
Nevinomysky Azot is considered one of the largest producers of mineral fertilizers and chemicals in Russia, including substances used to make explosives. At this plant, among other things, they produce compounds used in the manufacture of artillery shells. Ascent analysts have calculated that this is already the 6th attack on the facility since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. There were also explosions there and in Pyatigorsk. And no, it wasn't because of Ukrainian drones. A gas station exploded there during the unloading of a gas tanker. The cause was a violation of safety regulations. The blast wave even shattered windows in nearby houses. There.
Here, look! There is a sharp broken shard of clear glass just sitting right here on the ground.
But don't worry, Russians. Firefighters with new technologies will come to your aid. Just like in Ufa. There was a ceremonial event there with firefighters and the mayor in attendance. The mayor wanted to say something important to the firefighters, actually. They were supposed to be filmed beautifully by a drone. But what other technologies are there in Ufa? The Ryazan oil refinery, one of the most powerful in Russia, is on fire. This is one of Ukraine's responses to the recent terrorist shelling of Kyiv and other cities, as a result of which dozens of civilians were killed. The Ukrainian armed forces are targeting military and oil infrastructure, while Russians strike and kill sleeping children. But the Kremlin will inevitably get a painful boomerang in return.
Ukrainian drones of retribution have taken to the skies? In response to the monstrous shelling of peaceful Ukrainian cities on May 13th and 14th, in which the Kremlin used almost 900 UAVs, the Ukrainian armed forces launched a special operation in Russian airspace and in temporarily occupied territories. During the night of May 15th, SPS drones carried out 55 strikes on 23 targets. Military targets and facilities deep within the operational rear of Bolot, Taganrog, Yeisk, the temporarily occupied territories of Crimea, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia and Luhansk regions, including Berdyansk, Melitopol and so on. In Russian, Yeisk. Local telegram channels report a fire in the area of the airfield. Air defense systems were actively operating there throughout the night. However, all the efforts of the Russian air defense turned out to be in vain. Despite the intense barrage of fire, Ukrainian drones from the unmanned systems forces reached their targets. Their prize was a unique B-200 amphibious aircraft and a Ka-27 helicopter in Yeisk, as well as more air defense systems. By Friday morning, the enemy had suffered losses. A Tor-M2 air defense system in the Luhansk region, a Pantsir S-1 in Crimea, and another cargo ship carrying ammunition in Berdyansk, Zaporizhzhia region. Taganrog's air defense was also very active on Thursday night into Friday. The local residents, so as not to attract Ukrainian drones, have even started speaking in whispers. Bryansk isn't sleeping either. There too, Ukrainian drones are operating in the skies. However, this time, Ryazan suffered the most, even though it's almost 1,000 kilometers from Kyiv.
I woke up at 4 a.m., looked out the window and just saw this. Just smoke, something is burning. And before that, there was an explosion. I don't know, Mom, honestly, sorry for the language, but this is fucked up.
Ukrainian drones of retribution struck the Rosneft oil refinery, one of the largest in Russia.
Damn, just check this shit out. It's all smoke from the oil refinery. It's going over there, basically.
According to local authorities, a fire broke out at the facility. However, Russian officials haven't said a word about the scale. Meanwhile, city residents could clearly see at least 4 sources of fire, including 2 hot vacuum oil processing units that stood out. Oil? What does it mean if the refinery stops operating? It'll be for a very long time, if not permanently.
They're flying over there. I don't have street names, but they're flying that way. Look, over there, do you see? Damn, right now. You can't see a damn thing. Why aren't they shooting them down?
By the way, more and more Russians are asking the same question. Where is the infamous Putin air defense? And why isn't it covering important facilities from Ukrainian drone attacks? And the answer is very simple. Instead of protecting, they themselves terrorize their own citizens. So right at the very start of the attack, Russian air defense troops fired directly at a residential building in the middle of Ryazan.
Fuck people, damn it.
In the video, it's clearly audible that this wasn't a drone. The Russian air defense system seemed to deliberately strike directly at the apartment building. But that was just the beginning. Next, the clumsy operators of electronic warfare systems got involved. They managed to knock one of the Ukrainian drones off course and directed it straight into the main symbol of unity in Ryazan, the so-called tricolor, an apartment building painted in the colors of the Russian flag.
Poor people. Poor people.
You couldn't come up with a better anti-advertisement for Russian air defense. It's simply impossible. The multi-apartment tricolor can be seen from almost anywhere in the city. And when clouds of smoke rise above it, it's even more visible.
Everyone is leaving. They're leaving. Unbelievable.
After the residents of the damaged apartment building, all the other residents started pouring out of the city as well. Ryazan seems to be repeating the fate of Tuapse. There, oil rain has already started to fall, and it's simply impossible to breathe on the streets. Everyone who can't evacuate from the city is sealing their windows and doors tightly, and in horror, they watch the black clouds spreading over the city. Meanwhile, the local authorities are only asking people not to panic, or at least not to spread panic on the not yet blocked internet. And the Russian Ministry of Defense merely stated that Russian air defense forces shot down 355 Ukrainian drones overnight, conveniently forgetting to mention that they hit their own residential buildings.
The first death of a Russian student who went to fight against Ukraine under contract has been officially confirmed. Meanwhile, the leadership of the Russian army has started luring women into the war as well. Female students, the details are in our report.
Valeria Verin was supposed to receive her diploma from the Construction Technical School in Buryatia this year. But in January, the time we do not know, this is not only in Russia, but also in Europe, drone forces.
He lied to me, said he was going to Valberis to earn money. And when I found out he had signed a contract, I almost lost my mind. I said, "What have you done? Where did you go?"
Valeria's adoptive mother, Oksana, recounts through tears. The recruit said that nothing would happen to him and everything would be fine. The 23-year-old fighter trained as a UAV operator for 3 months. And on April 6th, his mother was informed that Valery had died under mortar fire. This is the first known case of a recruited Russian student dying in the war in Ukraine. The recruitment of students into Russia's drone forces has reached terrifying proportions. Many universities have already even been given quotas, recruitment plans.
At the end of last year, a new branch of the military was formed, the Unmanned Systems Forces, and a cover story was invented for it. Look, you see, these aren't tank operators anymore, not infantry, not assault troops. This is something closer to you, the youth. Some computers, control panels, little screens, goggles. Be modern, trendy, youthful. Be just like in video games. Control a drone and strike the enemy.
Across universities throughout Russia, more than 200 recruitment meetings have been held with UAV troops recruiters, where students are persuaded that the contract is for 1 year and that they will be safe. Students are promised guaranteed discharge after a year, with high payouts and the preservation of their place at university. But they're not just promised perks. At some universities, they threaten expulsion or try to provoke students' pride. For example, students at the Baroness University of Engineering Technologies were asked to imagine their loved ones being raped. This was supposed to motivate them to join the drone troops. And it wasn't a soldier from the Frontline saying this, but the dean of the faculty. Is there a reason or not in the audience?
Thank you, just for being a man who studied. I'm tearing up, take off your skirts and hang them up in the bathhouse. And shave off your beards so there's nothing left.
Yeah, just like that.
Let your beards grow out. What kind of men are you? Do you consider yourselves men? Who are you going to side with in this? With the slackers? Or are you future fathers who will raise your children properly? I turned it on. Or what? Or are we going to surrender? Come on, we surrender. How do you imagine this?
The first ones to get cut are the students with poor academic performance. Young men are simply threatened that they need to quickly clear all their academic debts, otherwise they'll be expelled. But signing a contract is a good way to solve the problem. You serve for a year, come back to your reserve spot and make up your academic debts. Very few students want to sign a contract and go to war of their own free will.
Even if they're not against military service as such, I think it's just a matter of a serious change of plans. They need to finish university. That's why they came to study. Here, they are sent off, their studies are interrupted, supposedly interrupted, for a year or two, and they are sent to serve under contract. At the very least, it's inconvenient.
The Kremlin has issued an order to the Ministry of Education to send 2% of students to the war in Ukraine. The pro-Kremlin publication Gazeta.ru sent an official inquiry to the agency requesting a comment on the information about the demand from the head of the Ministry of Education, Falkov, that universities send at least 2% of their students to serve under contract. The full response was as follows: nothing is known about these instructions. A 1-year contract and then a return to studies. This is a fiction. If a student signs it, they will remain in the Russian army until the end of the war. And there's no guarantee it will be in the drone forces.
Not a single good lawyer will be able to get you back if you've already signed the contract. After 1 year, students who signed the contract will be surprised, just as those who were mobilized once were, to find out that in fact there is no term of service. And there will be another movement of parents and students demanding their return, just like there was with the wives of the mobilized. It's better to address the situation now than to fall for the tricks of the Ministry of Defense.
The death of Valery Avarin near Luhansk under mortar fire. The first recorded death of a student and clearly not the last. But let other 20-year-old Russians think about whether they are ready to die in Ukraine and for what.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin continues its provocations in Europe. Vladimir Putin has simplified the process of obtaining Russian citizenship for residents of the unrecognized Transnistria region. The decree signed by the dictator applies to adult foreign citizens and stateless persons who permanently reside in the region. According to the document, residents of Transnistria will be able to apply for Russian citizenship without going through the standard procedure. The right to simplified citizenship has also been granted to orphans and children left without parental care, as well as incapacitated persons who permanently reside in Transnistria. However, in such cases, the application must be submitted by legal representatives or by the heads of organizations under whose supervision the children or incapacitated citizens are placed. Let me remind you, earlier in Russia, a law was passed allowing the use of the Russian army to protect Russians abroad. This means the military can be deployed in cases of arrest, detention, or criminal prosecution of Russian citizens. The decision to deploy troops will be made by Putin himself. And while Russians dream of seizing Ukrainian territories and Putin signs ever new support measures for participants in the special military operation, the scam is handing out Russian citizenships. Russians are living life to the fullest. Most of their settlements are only suitable as sets for horror movies. And here is yet another piece of evidence. A Russian woman showed the road to a kindergarten in her hometown in Kamchatka. All around are abandoned buildings, dirty, empty streets, and stray dogs. Meanwhile, Russian aerial bombs continue to kill Russians and the authorities are hiding it. According to local Russian officials, in the village of Dubovoye near Belgorod, fragments of munitions fell on a private house. As a result of the incident, a local resident died. But the regional operations headquarters completely forgot to mention that the munition in question was a FAB aerial bomb. According to Pepl, a Russian aerial bomb fell on the house at 5 a.m. After that, the authorities evacuated residents from 2 neighboring apartment buildings. By the way, such accidental drops of munitions from Russian aircraft have become widespread. According to Astra's calculations, since the beginning of the year, at least 24 Russian aerial bombs have fallen on districts along the Russian and occupied Ukrainian border, and in 2025 there were 143 such incidents. The death of a Russian woman caused by the actions of Russian air defense. The media presented it as a murder committed by Ukrainians, but the whole truth came to light thanks to a court decision that ended up in the hands of hackers and journalists. The incident occurred in the Bryansk region in January of the year 2025. At that time, the governor stated that a woman had died as a result of an attack by Ukrainian drones on the Karachevsky district. In reality, this is clearly stated in the court decision. The combat crew, the Panzer S-1, fired 4 air defense missiles and one of them fell on the victim's house. The woman's son is seeking compensation from the Ministry of Defense. He went to court, and that's where the document leak occurred. By the way, the judges ruled in favor of the plaintiff, ordering the military to pay 1 million in moral damages. Every 5th Russian considers mass protest in the country possible due to the decline in living standards. The proportion of Russian citizens who consider mass protests possible due to declining living standards has reached 20% in the country. Another 14% of respondents believe protests with political demands are possible. These are the results of a Levada Center study. Both figures are the highest since July 2024. Here are the details.
Russia is on the brink of revolt. According to Levada Center research, every 5th Russian is willing to protest against the decline in living standards.
Willingness is one thing, but reality is another. Yes, indeed, the situation inside Russia is so bad that people already understand that it is necessary to end the war, and they realize that the longer the war continues, the worse their economic situation becomes, the worse their circumstances get. Political.
Thus, 20% of Russians are ready to stand up for an improvement in their standard of living. This figure has reached a record high over the past 2 years.
Roughly speaking, things like livestock slaughter, the same cows, are more of an economic issue than a political one. But it's clear that in any case, decisions are made politically. But restricting the internet is more of a political issue than an economic one. Although there is also an economic component to internet restrictions because it hits small businesses.
Another 14% of Russian citizens are ready to make political demands.
Moreover, the majority of citizens directly associate the worsening situation with Putin's personal stance. And gradually, people's willingness to participate in protests is starting to grow. What's surprising is that the willingness to join political protests is increasing even more than for economic ones.
Nevertheless, at the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, protest sentiment was even higher.
They are taking the lives of innocent Ukrainian people, our own brothers. In
February 2022, mass protests were considered possible. 29% of Russians and 23% were ready to participate in economic actions, while 18% were ready for political ones.
Some of Putin's support group was counting on a quick result, a quick positive outcome. Some people thought that seizing foreign lands was a positive result, while others just wanted to indulge their imperial pride, like, now we'll take Kyiv, look how great we are. But none of that happened. That is, there was no euphoria like there was after the annexation of Crimea. No one was able to feel it. And at the same time, on one hand, there are strikes, Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory. In other words, the war has come to Russia itself. And on the other hand, there is economic failure.
The rise in protest sentiment is linked to the decline in support for the authorities. The approval rating of the Kremlin dictator Putin is currently at its lowest since the start of the full-scale invasion, standing at 65.5%. Things are even worse for Putin's United Russia Party. Their support is currently only 28%.
That's all I have time to share for now. I'll now hand over the information relayed to my colleagues. They are already preparing the most up-to-date information for you. In the meantime, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's very important to us.